Ready?
Ready?
Ready.
I have a dream I hope will come true, that you're here with me and I'm here with you. I wish that the earth, sea, and the sky up above will send me someone to love us.
Welcome back to More Life. I'm Jody Dean. By the way, Joni Stevenson is an elementary school teacher and actually sent that video to Jimmy Fallon, hoping to encourage families to try their own classroom instrument challenge. If COVID-19 hasn't done anything else, it's suddenly given most of us a much greater appreciation for the people who do jobs we rarely think about. Doctors, nurses, and healthcare workers, of course, but more people are now taking a moment every day to say thank you to restaurant workers, delivery drivers, and grocery clerks. Most times when we walk in to buy groceries, we don't really think about the massive numbers of freight haulers and enormous logistics it takes to ensure that shelves are stocked. We're sure thinking about it now. Keeping the supply lines running is one of those things we often take for granted, as is the abundance of such things as food itself. We have it, but we have to get it from one place to another. And on top of that, many families are now struggling to even afford what they need.
Especially right now when people can't go to work.
60% of my clients are new now. From April the 1st to April the 10th, we'd already fed 2,551 families. Last week we did 75,000 meals. You know, that's what food pantries exist. We exist to make sure that you have a meal.
You've also seen an increase in those who are willing to help.
What I'm grateful for the most, when people see it, they get up out of their seats, they drive through and say, God bless you for what you're doing. My mother, Miss Minnie, her name was Minnie Bell. And before this all happened, I said, please install a bell in the back so whenever someone drops it off, it's ring Minnie's bell. There have been times where we've run out of cereal or we run out of snacks for the kids and Minnie's bell rang.
Now, if there are still those among us who grouse that we can't always find what we're looking for, a bit of historical perspective. Throughout the Second World War, many nations of the world imposed food rationing. It was a way of making sure that soldiers at the front had the resources they need to defeat the Axis powers. Americans got ration books filled with stamps used to buy goods. We built freighters known as Liberty ships, which braved German U-boat patrols to keep the European allies alive. But even so, England imposed food rationing in 1940. Because of the war effort and the following time of austerity, the rationing lasted 14 years, 9 full years after World War II had ended. Now, this is a photo of what each citizen was allowed per week. A few ounces of meat, 3 or 4 strips of bacon, 1 egg. Suddenly, this doesn't seem quite so bad. Not being able to get what we want whenever we want it is something we're just not used to. But in many ways, that was also true of the greatest generation. While our parents and grandparents didn't have the creature comforts we enjoy, they'd certainly grown accustomed to things like electricity. Yet the people of England lived under a blackout for 6 long years. Every night, all outdoor lights were turned off to confound the German bombers up above. For 6 years. Maybe it's our generation's turn to see if we can rise to greatness. Think of all the ways people are adapting. Take Tennille Powers, a friend of ours. Like so many other entrepreneurs, COVID-19 wrecked her business teaching microblading. And then it got worse.
Right after we started social distancing because of COVID-19, your salon burned down.
Luckily, it hurt, but we can move past it. But we're able to move our entire training online.
You had to rethink the plan, which is what a lot of people are having to do right now.
This is my 4th business, and there's been so many hills that I've acquired those skills over the last 20 years. So we just have to laugh it off. And that's what we're doing. And we're making it even better now because of this problem.
What do you say to business owners and entrepreneurs who are facing this same challenge?
You've got to look at life in a positive angle because, I mean, that's what it's all about.
The fact is, we love a comeback. Getting up off the mat and continuing the fight is ingrained in us. As an example, I turn to an old friend, someone people in Dallas-Fort Worth tuned to for years. Ron Chapman is one of this area's most iconic broadcasters, a Hall of Famer whose voice North Texans awakened to for decades. Now in his 80s, he was home with his wife several years ago when suddenly the man who'd become a legend by talking realized he couldn't.
The Dallas Dandy, the Fort Worth Wonder.
Nearly 8 years after surviving a major stroke, the always indomitable Chapman has never thought of giving up.
Not an option. It was the thing that you've got to do. If you don't have the recovery, then Where are you?
Rehab and recovery were difficult, so much so that the man who once never seemed at a loss for words had to relearn almost everything, including how to swallow.
The swallow thing took 2 different physicians. It was a matter of holding the Adam's apple.
Chapman, who admittedly tended to bend everyone and everything else to his will, surprised even himself with his tenacity.
Yes, and you learned to be very careful.
Even so, being forced to take his meals through a stomach tube was an awakening.
And that was all liquid for quite some time.
But is Chapman's experience a useful example of what can happen when humility and determination combine, especially in a time of uncertainty and deep anxiety?
Wow. Boy, that's a big question, and it's very, very important.
Yet even as jobs disappear and threats of a second wave of COVID-19 crowd the headlines, Chapman is hopeful. He has reason to be. During his time, he was far and away the most listened-to voice in Dallas-Fort Worth radio, offering comfort spanning the years, from the Kennedy assassination through 9/11. And he's seen us come back every time.
And that's the good news. There is a song, Roy Clark did a song called Right or Left at Oak Street. A man making a decision. Does he go on with life or make a right turn and head to Vegas or something? And it's a little bit of a sermon to me.
For every man's life is a gamble. It depends on the turn that he takes.
Which begs the question, what might we be able to overcome? Back with more Life in a moment.